and welcome to this session on talent. Is HR losing its position as talent champion? To discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome Paul Sparrow, Director at the Centre for Performance-led HR, Lancaster University Management School. Hello. And Bob Marsden, Director of People and Organisational Development at Balfour Beatty Utility Solutions.
Good morning.
Welcome to you both. Paul, you've recently done some work on talent, and one of the findings was that there's uncertainty as to who should own it. Is it the CEO, is it the business unit director, or is it HR?
Yeah.
Can you sort of tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, it was an interesting piece of work because it was done by talent directors themselves. So this is Department of Work and Pensions, Royal Mail, Royal Bank of Scotland, NG Bailey. And they all really face a common issue. And the challenge that they were looking at, the challenge that was common to all of them was the issue of boardroom engagement. Right. Essentially, how do you convey the messages as a talent director to the board, and in ways and with language that is actually acceptable? And I think one of the things that came out was that clearly HR's role is very much as a coach to the board in helping them understand the key messages.
Okay, and why does it matter who owns talent?
Well, I think really because of the question of what do you mean by talent,
right,
and how you define it. We know that actually there are four components that are important. Yes, of course, it's about skills and competencies and so on, and human capital, as academics would call it. It's also about your social capital, your networks, your ability to actually get things done through those networks. It's about your business insight, your insight to the business model, and it's about your political capital. One of the issues really is different people have different insights to what really makes someone talented.
Bob, how do you define talent in your company, and where does it sit?
Well, I don't think we've really got that far. The thing about talent as a concept, I think it's something that's been picked up a lot by the HR professionals and in the academic world. The approach I've adopted in the past is really not to get into a discussion about what it all means. It's more about producing some results for the business.
Yeah.
And therefore, I've taken a much more sort of pragmatic and proactive approach, which is really to say, going back to your initial question, I think, which is my first target is always to get the CEO on side. And once you've cracked that, I think life becomes considerably easier.
Yeah.
And most CEOs recognise the need, but don't always sort of have worked out how to achieve any results as far as talent is concerned.
Right, okay. Have you seen any correlation between the credibility of the HR function in the eyes of the CEO and what they're doing in talent?
Oh, sure. One of the biggest challenges today, actually, is do you really know who your corporate heroes are? The reality is, even before the credit crunch, I mean, half of organisations, if you looked at the capabilities in their strategic plans, they were new to the plan. Now, what that means is the line don't understand the capabilities well as HR. The other thing that becomes clear from that is, when you start to analyse the business model and you say, well, what are the job roles on which the success of this model is mission critical? And often, chief executives understand that. And when they see HR also understanding what the new equation looks like and what new contribution from HR should be, they're on side. They then will let us have whatever sophisticated process or not. They say that that's for HR to kind of that's your own territory. But I think they look to see, do we understand the relevance of some of these new capabilities? Would
you see talent, Bob, as the high potentials, the senior team throughout the business? Because there's quite a lot of different approaches.
Well, I think you have to start somewhere. And that, generally speaking, if you get the CEO on board, the next step down is to get the board themselves. So it's a fairly straightforward argument or discussion with them to say, well, if you want to move on to something else, you want to become the CEO, who's going to take your job? They're also, I think, generally speaking, more familiar with the individuals involved. And one of the things that I have found in the past is that organisations, again, can get quite lost in the process of saying, okay, in 5 years' time, we think the organisation will look like this, which means the capabilities we'll need will look like this. And it's all a bit sort of difficult to grasp. And consequently, I think some of the discussions become quite difficult and a bit sort of fantasy-like, because you're dealing with so many uncertainties. So I tend to think much more about the now and say, okay, what core skills are these talented people going to have that enables them to survive in this future world, whatever it might look like? Because that, at the end of the day, it's about performance.
Did you develop your own system, or have you worked with other people? Because one other sort of question I think that's raised sometimes is importing a sort of a talent management system versus developing something that's right for the culture of your organisation.
Well, this is probably sort of heresy, but I tend to be much more pragmatic. I mean, I think I've been through sophisticated systems and seen that produce results in terms of which people we should be looking at and so on. And then I've been through systems where actually you just sit down as senior manager and just say, well, you tell me who you think are your high potential people. So you might get only 80% of the 100 that you had before, but it saves a hell of a lot of time. And also gets you on the path of doing something, because it's okay identifying all these people, but then what do you do next?
Yeah, and that was something that was raised in the research.
Oh, absolutely.
Wasn't it?
I mean, as you say, people mean different things by talent management, and what you find is it's almost like a genetic fingerprint, right? So we profiled 13 organisations. Now, on the surface, they all look the same. Everyone says we all have the same tablets of stone. Yes, this is about performance versus potential, But you don't have to dig very deep before you realise how different it was. Now, going back to what I said about, how would you define potential? And what we found was that each organisation, 4 things. Your philosophy. Do you believe that talent management is just about, senior elites, small population, or is everyone talent? And we all have that debate. So do you think that talent management is about critical people or critical roles and so on? You can look at the practices, you can look at the providers, if it's occupational psychologists or search consultants, and it is so different. And the thing that fascinates me, and it really does fascinate me, is how you realise that the judgments that you're making are so dependent on how your organisation has to handle this question of talent. And I think it's important that talent professionals understand that. It's useful to be able to benchmark. It's useful to be able to look at some of the key ideas that exist in the external world. But at the end of the day, you're designing your own system for your own company.
Turning it the other way round, what are the talented people that you've identified looking for, and particularly in this sort of age of austerity, as we call it, how can we deliver when we may not be able to use some of the mechanisms that previously we've used?
Well, I think the environment's changed with the depression that we're in right now. I mean, most organisations are in what I would call a sort of dash for cash. I mean, they're trying to reduce loans, they reduce interest payments and stuff like that. So what they're trying to avoid is cash leaving the organisation. That then means you have to get your current people to perform. First of all, to make the organisation efficient, because that's what the name of the game is right now. But also, in the medium term, to make it more effective. So in a situation before where often there was business growth, there were sexy new projects coming up, you could actually put somebody into that sort of thing to develop their talents, prove that they could work in different environments and so on. It's a narrower field now. So what it makes you do is look very hard at the talent you've got and say, okay, let's look at that individual, work with them to identify what they want to do, where their aspirations and future career direction they want it to go, and then say, okay, well, let's see if we can line these things up. So I think the discussion and the debate and the matching and so on is different.
Paul, are there any top tips out of having done this research that you could give us for the HR community?
Well, I think a lot of it really comes down to also being clear about the high level purpose that you want your talent system to deliver. I mean, I agree about the pragmatic approach. I mean that there is so. First tip actually is don't follow ideology. I mean, we can all remember, the war for talent, and there was a lovely quip. I remember Geoffrey Pfeffer, made the quote about that, because that was all about. This is all about a handful, or key stars and so on. And he made the point, that if everyone has to think outside the box, maybe it's the box that needs fixing. And the reality is that we're in a different context. His point was, actually, it is not just key talent, it's actually your systems, your productivity. And we know in these days of much more attention to lean management, those issues are important. So the first thing, actually, this is about pragmatic choices. We don't just read those books. But I think there is... one tip I would say is to think about how you will try and future-proof your talent. And I think that, that more kind of open, creative, but actually really quite practical thinking, I think is important.
Great. And Bob, is there one lesson that you've sort of found over your years in HR in relation to talent?
Yes, I think that if you need talent, you will find it from somewhere. Because one of the things that is happening at the moment, we are rapidly heading towards a global market for talent. One of the big problems we have is getting people in with specialist electrical skills. And we have trained and brought in people from the Philippines. A previous organisation I worked with was bringing nurses in from South Africa. So even if there's a shortage in your immediate environment of a particular talent, there is a global market out there of lots of people who want to come and work in the UK.
Well, what a great way to end. Thank you very much to both of you for taking part in this. And I hope you enjoyed the discussion. I think there's still a lot of issues around talent management, not least where it sits in a company and how it's connected with business drivers. We'd be very interested to hear your comments, so please feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you.